Have you ever played a pen and paper RPG? If so, which one, and did you enjoy it? No. I've never played a pen and paper RPG, but I've always desperately wanted to. For those that don't know, a pen and paper RPG would be like Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm not going to pretend to understand it because I've never played it, but I have some insight into it. And it allows me to talk a little bit and tell a little bit of a story here. So if you don't mind. So pen and paper RPGs. Hold on one second. Are like they're like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Where a bunch of guys sit around a table together, and one of them is a dungeon master, and he kind of quarterbacks the whole experience for everybody. And you have a character that you're playing, and you have to make decisions and fight, and you might die. And from my understanding, when you die, you're dead for good. But there's no, it's not a video game. It's just you sitting around with a pen and a paper and a character sheet, and you make these decisions. And I've always wanted to try and play one, but I've never had the opportunity. I've never had a group of friends that were into it. I did, however. I did LARP once. Now, for those of you that are unaware of what LARP means, it stands for live action role playing, and it's based a little bit on the same kind of rules as a pen and paper RPG is. You create a character. The only difference is that you're not sitting around the table rolling dice and hanging out with a bunch of guys who are playing a character. You actually embody that character with a bunch of other people that are doing the same. And how I got into this was there was one video, one Q&A video I made where I talked about a guy that I was friends with back in high school named Mike, who turned out to be a pathological liar. But Mike approached me one day. This was back when we were still friends. Mike approached me one day, and he said, "You know, Paul, I wanted to invite you to this thing. I think you'd be interested in it." And he explained it to me. It was called Vampire the Masquerade, and it was a LARP game where people pretended to be vampires. Now, there were a couple of things that instantly entered my mind when he was explaining this to me. Number one, I was like, I'm not even remotely into the idea of walking around, pretending to be a vampire. That does not appeal to me. But there was this other, smaller, quieter, but much more seductive idea that entered into my brain, which was, this place is going to be chock full of, like, super hot goth chicks. They're going to be everywhere. Like, goth chicks as far as the fucking eye can see. They're going to be all over the place. And I could be, like, right in the midst of them. And maybe I could get laid if I go to this. And so I made this fucking ridiculous decision to go and attend this LARP party. Okay? This LARP extravaganza. And so he goes, okay, you're going to come. So he helps me build my character. Now, in this Vampire the Masquerade game, apparently vampires exist in a bunch of different clans of vampires. And see, look, I have a mind like a steel trap, okay? So if it seems like I know a lot about this, it's because when I get something in there, it's hard to get it out. There are different clans of vampires. There's like Bruja, right? And they're kind of like rebels, anarchists kind of the vampire world. And then there's one of the clans is Nosferatu. And the Nosferatu clan, kind of based around that old movie, the old horror movie with Max Schreck in it, Nosferatu. You've probably seen the cover with him, like, pretty much everybody's at least seen the cover of Nosferatu. But this clan is like, they're twisted. So when they become vampires, it twists them and makes them into this gnarled, nasty-looking being. And so the Nosferatu vampires, they live in the sewers. And they're like spies of the vampire world, right? They're information dealers. They can go invisible, and they spy on other people, and they have the ability to look normal to the outside world. They can cast a spell themselves. to make them, and I'm sorry, look, if there's vampire masquerade people, I'm not making fun. This is how I feel. They can cast a spell on themselves to look like a normal person, but in actuality, they're this twisted kind of demon-looking thing. And so I'm flipping through the pages of the different types, and I wanted to be a Nosferatu. It was the only one that sounded even remotely interesting to me. And it was the only one that I felt I could remotely even pull off, because a lot of them are like, there's the Toreadors, right, who are supposed to be, I think they're the ones that are like super beautiful. You know, like even the men or the male or female vampires are super sexually attractive to everybody. And I was like, I can't pick that one, right? I can't be a fucking Toreador, because that's not, I mean, look, I'm an actor, but there's only so much you can't act man tits away. You know, you can't act chubby little, you know, high school sophomore away. You can't act that. And so I was really only interested in being a Nosferatu. And so I took the book back to Mike, and I was like, okay, I want to be one of those. And he goes, dude, don't pick anything other than a Nosferatu, please. And I was like, why? It's like, you don't want to, just trust me, you don't want to be a Nosferatu. Nobody likes them. And I was like, that's cool. I like that. I don't want to just stand around and talk about how goth we all are. Like, I want there to be some intrigue. I want to stir. And he's like, okay, that's fine. So he helps me make my character sheet. And, we go to this vampire party. I rode with him at this point. And we are driving into town, and we're kind of out on the outskirts of town in a very upscale area of town. And he drives up to this big mansion. Now, I'm not talking about just a big, nice house. I'm talking about an actual, like, mansion. 2 stories. Looks like a fucking stereotypical mansion. Has a gate that you have to buzz yourself in, and then it automatically opens, and a big driveway, big arched I mean, like, you've seen these types of houses in the movies, right? These huge palatial kind of, like, why the fuck would you ever need a house like this type of house? Big fountain out in front. Big swimming pool in the back, mansion. So we pull up to this, and he's got the code to the gate, so he lets himself in. We go, and there's all these cars there, and we walk in, and the first thing I noticed was that it was kind of a sausage fest, which was really disappointing. There were a few girls there, but mostly it was dudes, and they were all dressed to the nines. Like some of them were wearing, like, I don't know how to describe it, like kind of tuxedo coats and like those rings. Have you ever seen the rings that like aren't just on your finger like a ring? They cover the whole finger and kind of go and wrap around the wrist. So they're like, you know, they greet us at the door, and they're like, come in. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And so anyway, I'd kind of when you do this LARPing thing, you have to create a character for yourself, right? And so I had created this character of mine that, like, he got off on the fact that other people were repulsed by him. Like, he hated this whole vampire society thing. He hated the politeness and the clothes. And he just wanted people to not want him around. But because of vampire politics, they kind of had to let him be around, right? And the vampire politics thing, I won't go into that. Well, I will. I'll have to at some point. But anyway, I get there, and I'm kind of milling around, and there's a certain symbol that you have to put on yourself to show I can't remember what it was. Like, you have to make a hand gesture to show that you either look normal as a Nosferatu, like the twisted demon Max Shrek Nosferatu, or you've thrown up your human look. And I was like, walking in there, I was like, dude, I'm going to let everybody know that when I'm amongst other vampires here, I'm not going to bother looking like a fucking human. And so whatever the symbol was, because you had to kind of, like, when you walked up to somebody, you just gave them a quick flash of the symbol to let them know that your, you know, glamour thing, you either look like a human or you look like yourself. So I'd throw them that quick symbol, and they so every time I walked up to meet somebody, they'd see me throw up the symbol, and they were like, you know, they had to react that way, because in character I looked like a nasty, twisted, hairy, humpbacked, you know, thing. And so it's really, like, none of them liked it. And I could tell that none of their characters liked it, but none of them liked it either, because I just didn't give a fuck about all the, I don't know how to put it, a lot of poncery going on. If you get it was just like, oh yes, and then what do you think about the political situation in the north of the state, and blah, blah, and I was just like, hey guys, and so everybody hated me. But I found out eventually, after traveling around and talking to this mostly male vampire gathering, that there was one other Nosferatu that played the game in my area, and that he was there. And I wanted to meet this guy. I was like, dude, we could totally team up. And so I finally found this guy, and I fucking shit you not, he's wearing what I can only describe as like a Phantom of the Opera outfit. He's wearing a top hat, like a stovepipe Abe Lincoln hat, and the half mask, the white half Phantom of the Opera mask, and a cape. And he's sitting there, like, with one other person having this talk. And so I walked up and I introduced myself to him, and he was like, I don't even know, like, why you would bother. Like, why didn't you pick one of the other types of vampire? He talked all, oh, yes, and then, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's good to know that there's another of my kind here in the city. And I'm just like, fuck. So anyway, as it turns out, this was an important night that I had attended because the vampires were gathering to have elections, basically. The way that vampire society works is that every clan has what's called a primogen. So there's the clan, and then there's one vampire that leads that clan, right? And then amongst all of the clans, there's one prince, and the prince, my understanding is correct, and I guess you guys can correct me there, those of you that know about this. The prince can be either male or female, but the title is still prince. And that prince is the head of all of the vampire clans in that city. So you'd be the prince of Los Angeles or the prince of Las Vegas, right? And so it was time to do the big voting for the primogens of the clans. I guess the prince was already installed, and because there were now two Nosferatus, we had to decide between the two of us. Now, he had automatically been the primogen because he was the only Nosferatu in the city. But we had to decide who the leader of our clan was. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't know anything about the fucking game, and I didn't think I was ever coming back. But this, the Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom of the Opera walks up to me and he goes, I wanted to let you know that I'm not particularly interested in leading this clan, and I'd like you to do it. And I was like, I don't know how. And he's like, don't worry, there's nothing involved. I'm just tired of bearing the mantle of responsibility. And he's like, I'm like, okay, that's fine. So he defaulted it. He abstained him, from the voting. And so now, my first night here, nobody likes me because I'm walking around fucking with their whole la-di-da program, right? And now I get to sit at the table and make decisions. Now I'm a leader. Everybody hated that. But the whole night, it was real uncomfortable for me because, like I said, Nosferatu's can make themselves invisible. So I thought, hey, I'm supposed to be kind of a spy, so I'm going to walk around and spy on people and try and get information and sell it to other. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. So there's another hand signal that you had to hold up when you were invisible. When you cast your invisibility spell, I think it was called obfuscation. When you obfuscated, you had to hold up a symbol to let everybody know, hey, don't react to me because I'm invisible. So I walked around in the house, listening in, and all the conversations going on are inane. And then I noticed, kind of out in front, there was a whole group of vampires standing out in front, smoking. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go see what they're all talking about. And so I obfuscated and I walked to the front door and I opened the door and I close it behind me and I walk over to the group and I'm sitting there like trying to listen in on their conversations. And one of the guy goes, out of character. He says out of character and he pulls me aside and he goes, we all know you're here, right? And I was like, dude, I'm fucking invisible. And he goes, you opened the door. We saw the door open and saw it close behind you. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You're going to stickle the new guy on something? Can you just... Whatever. So anyway, that night was not the best experience that I've ever had. And I think I'd much rather play, a little Dungeons and Dragons than ever LARP again. Suffice to say, I didn't get laid. I was nowhere near getting laid at this thing.